Welcome back to Kids Corner. I'm Jonathon Kidd along with Jeff Dullack. Jeff, how's it going today?
It's going pretty well. You just got back from your vacation. I'm just hours from going on mine, so there's nothing to complain about right now.
Kids Corner is presented by Hungry Howie's Dough Raiser. Your next fundraiser comes with flavor crust. Go to doughraiser.com for more details. While I was off last week, I noticed MaxPreps came out with the top 16 most dominant Michigan high school football teams since 2006.
Yep. You had the week off, and you're the one that found this.
Yes, exactly. This is how MaxPreps broke it down. 20 points for a state title, 10 for a state championship game appearance. Other points are based on where a team finished in the final MaxPreps Michigan football computer rankings. For example, if a team finishes number 1 overall, it would receive 25 points. If it finished 25th overall, that team will only get 1 point. No points are awarded if the team did not finish in the top 25. Before we get to the 16 teams, do you like this process, how they did it?
I like the idea behind it. It makes it very difficult to really give it an honest ranking because you have to go off of MaxPreps rankings, and we all have different rankings each year. You know, I know Tom Markowski puts out our own rankings, and I guarantee you that they differ from what MaxPreps says, just because everybody has differences of opinion when it comes to rankings. But as far as the state title and state championship game appearance, that makes a lot of sense to me. You have to get some type of credit for making it to that point, winning it if you end up winning.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go from 16 to number 1 in case you didn't see these rankings last week.
Right.
Number 16 was Macomb, Dakota. Mm-hmm. Number 15 was Clarkston. 14 was Warren, De La Salle. 13 was Detroit King. Number 12 was Ithaca. 11 was Muskegon Catholic Central. Number 10 was Grand Rapids West Catholic. 9 was Rockford. 8 Detroit Cass Tech. 7 Zeeland West. 6 Birmingham Brother Rice. 5 East Grand Rapids. 4 Detroit Catholic Central. 3 Lowell. 2 Muskegon. The number 1 dominant team, according to MaxPreps in the last 10 years, was Orchard Lake St. Mary's. Mm-hmm. Jeff, your thoughts on Orchard Lake St. Mary's being their number 1 top program?
It's kind of hard to go, away from St. Mary's in that regard because when you look at it, this is over the course of the last decade, and St. Mary's has pretty much made a new home for themselves at Ford Field, whether it's the Catholic League final or the Division III final. They've made 8 appearances. They've won 4 titles. George Porras just had a machine going for the better part of the last 20 years, but really, since we're narrowing it down to the last 10 years, you really can't go wrong with St. Mary's. I mean, 8 out of 10 or 8 out of 11 championship game appearances, I mean, it speaks for itself.
Mm-hmm. We were talking before we went on that someone should be above Orchard Lake St. Mary's, and that team is?
I tend to lean towards East Grand Rapids. I know we're talking about year by year, but I just look at East Grand Rapids. The success that they had, probably 5 years ago and before that, they were just on a massive run, and maybe it's a little bit tainted because before that 2006 barrier, where they cut it off there, East Grand Rapids still had that dominant run. Maybe I'm overvaluing East Grand Rapids a little bit because of what they did before that. But, you look at just the dominance that East Grand Rapids had about 10, 15 years ago, and it really went up until 5 years ago when they stopped making those, regular appointments at Ford Field. East Grand Rapids, to me, was just that dominant team. If we're looking at a team that just, exuded dominance year in and year out, it was East Grand Rapids in my eyes.
Some of those teams had Calvin Grady and Joe Glendenning as their running backs.
That's right.
And like I said, they beat Orchard Lake St. Mary's. They have a case where they could be number 1.
Yeah, they really could. And, if we're talking about head-to-head, obviously that has something to do with it, because when we see what East Grand Rapids did head-to-head on the field with St. Mary's, they beat St. Mary's. St. Mary's finally got over that hump in 2011 and won that state title. They beat Mount Pleasant, but, that I still remember that game. That was a game that St. Mary's wanted East Grand Rapids at Ford Field. That was kind of what they wanted. That was really the year that St. Mary's was pointing towards, was finally getting over that hump. But you look at what East Grand Rapids did, starting in 2006, they beat Farmington Hills Harrison, a very good Harrison team at that, 42-17. That's just a dominant showing. And then you go the following year, just a 5 overtime thriller win over St. Mary's. They beat Inkster and Devin Gardner in 2008. They beat them 43-24. Then they beat St. Mary's back-to-back years in 2009, 2010, like you were saying, 24-21, 35-27. in that era, you look at just how dominant East Grand Rapids was, that kind of spoke to itself. However, what I think puts St. Mary's over the top in this regard, St. Mary's has been, the dominant team this half of the last 10 years, winning state titles. And the difference is when you look at that, East Grand Rapids isn't in the finals lately. It's been St. Mary's playing other teams other than East Grand Rapids, whereas East Grand Rapids was regularly playing St. Mary's.
And also, too, on Orchard Lake St. Mary's, their schedule's been very tough the last 10 years. Not only playing in the Catholic League Central Division that we always talk about, that, Catholic League Central Division is the toughest.
It's the cream of the crop. It's the end-all, be-all of high school conferences in Michigan.
But they played Cass Tech in the regular season. They do go out of state.
It's very true.
They go to play in Indiana. They go play in Ohio. So they have a strong case here for number one.
Oh, they absolutely do. And to be honest, I've gone back and forth, and I've just explaining myself a little bit here, I've kind of probably convinced myself back over to where, Orchard Lake St. Mary's is number one because the consistency they've had. They've played this tough competition in the regular season. And a lot of these St. Mary's teams, maybe not a lot of them, but a good number of them, have gotten into the playoffs at 5-4 because of that tough schedule. And that's a very misleading 5-4 record. Not many teams play the type of schedule that St. Mary's does. I know some of the other Catholic League schools do, but that's a tough schedule, and for them to not only make the playoffs but then make a run to the final says a lot about the pedigree of that program at this point.
And sticking with the Catholic League here, I notice on the list here they have 4 teams in the top 16. You have St. Mary's, obviously, 1. You got Detroit Catholic Central, 2.
Yep.
Brother Rice, 6, and DOSL 14. It shows the Catholic League Central Division is toughest league in the state.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we put it out there because it's a good debate. We have a lot of good conferences in the state of Michigan. You look at the OK Conference, you look at the OAA. There's several different conferences that have proven to be strong in the state of Michigan, but the Catholic League, year in, year out, you don't know who's going to make it there. You have a team like UD Jesuit, which is unfortunately kind of an afterthought when you're looking at football teams in the Catholic League, because that's just how dominant those first 4 that we listed off are. That's just really the case. UD Jesuit in years past has been on the doorstep of making it to the finals. They almost upset King back in 2015. But they're still a very solid football program. I don't think that's something that people realize. But you look at just the dominance that the Catholic League has had, because you have Catholic Central in Division 1, Brother Rice and Warren D. LaSalle in Division 2, and St. Mary's in Division 3. Any of those other 3 teams could compete with Catholic Central in Division 1. It's just kind of how the enrollment breaks out into divisions. And that speaks volumes about just how dominant the Catholic League is and is capable of being, not only now, but down the road.
On the west side of the state, you have 6 in the top 11 from the OK Conference. What's the better football, the east side or the west side football? The west side has their case.
Very much so. Yeah, you look at you just look at the west side of the state, and there's a lot of I couldn't even tell you how many divisions off the top of my head that are in the OK, but it's just a very balanced conference. And in my opinion, Catholic League is number 1, and nobody's ever going to convince me otherwise. But the OK Conference is number 2. The OAA can make their way into that conversation every now and then, depending on the year. There are years that the OAA has the Clarkstons and the Lake Orions and Southfields and Rochester Adams, and when those teams are all going good, that's a very strong conference. But for me, it's Catholic League number 1, OK Conference number 2, and it's kind of what shows in this list. I see teams like East Grand Rapids and Lowell and Muskegon. These are very good programs, and they're not always at Ford Field. Like St. Mary's has been there 8 times since 2006, but these are programs that have been there 4, 5, 6 times in that stretch.
In your opinion, who's the best West Side team on this list? If you have to say, out of the success of the last 10 years, easily you can say Muskegon. Lowell has his case.
Yep. I'll stick with East Grand Rapids because of what they did at the earlier part of this decade-long run. They've just had such a dominant run over the years. However, just to mix it up, if I had to go with I've talked plenty about East Grand Rapids already, but just to mix it up, you look at a team like Muskegon. Muskegon is a team that bounces between Division 2 and Division 3. And I'm not making excuses. I know Coach Shane Fairfield wouldn't make excuses, but this is a Muskegon team that has gone through some buzzsaws in recent years. They went through. They have to get through Lowell in Division II to even make it to the Division II final. And who do they see there? The Birmingham Brother Rice teams that pretty much put together a dynasty in a span of 3 years. And now they're back in Division III, and who are they going through? St. Mary's, who's going to be looking for, I believe, a 4th state championship in a row this fall. That's a very tough place to be, and I think Muskegon has just been super competitive every single year. And you look at year in, year out, Shane Fairfield and that coaching staff just continue to pump out high-level players year after year. And the one thing that you also look to is the quarterback play that team has had, and that's why they got there. Deshaun Thrower, when they were playing in Division II, Deshaun Thrower, who went to play college basketball, led them to the finals then, and now we have Khalil Pimpleton, who just moved on, led them to the Division III final last year, and then this year they have Ladarius Jefferson, who's very capable of doing it again. It's a machine.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to deep dive into this list a little more here on Kids Corner, presented by Hungry Howie's Dough Raiser.
Fundraising should be fresh, flavorful, and simple. We have the perfect solution at Hungry Howie's, Dough Raiser. Your team or school can sell paper pizza certificates that can be redeemed for 1 medium pizza at participating locations.
Hungry Howie's makes it easy. It's just a little mini pizza box, but we make lots of money, lots of dough.
Go to doughraiser.com to learn more and sign up. Your next fundraiser comes with flavored crust. Welcome to Hungry Howie's Dough Raiser.
The Zenith Prep Kickoff Classic returns to Midtown Detroit on the campus of Wayne State University August 24th through the 26th. Log on to DetroitSports.org for more information. Tickets on sale now. You gotta be there.
Welcome back to Kids Corner here on the State Champs Podcast Network. I'm here with Jeff Dullack. Kids Corner is presented by Hungry Howie's Dough Raiser. We're going to continue our discussion on MaxPreps' top 16 most dominant Michigan high school football teams since 2006. We have 2 Detroit teams in here, Cass Tech and King. Cass Tech is 8. King is 13. Is that a respectable number there?
It's funny that you say that, because when I first looked at this list, I saw Cass Tech at number 8, and my first thought was, that's ridiculous. That's the absolute first thing I thought. And then you kind of look at it and just how steady these programs ahead of them have been. You look at Cass Tech, maybe I'll move them up to 6 or 7. But when you look at it, Zeeland West, the team right above them, has won 4 titles. Mm-hmm. That's just one more than Cass Tech, but that is significant. Zeeland West won 4 titles. That's a very underrated program, first and foremost. That's a program that is always there, and then you kind of, oh yeah, Zeeland West is back. It's very regular.
And normally Zeeland West, when they win big.
They dominate. They have that system that they run, and it's very tough for high school defenses to figure that out, and it's very deceptive. And I think that's a credit to John Shillito, the coach there. And they've just got a really good program there. But going back to Cass Tech, they're ranked behind Birmingham Brother Rice. Brother Rice has 3 titles, just like Cass Tech does. Cass Tech has 1 more appearance in the finals. So it's really, in my opinion, it's very close. And you look at the point totals, according to MaxPreps, Brother Rice has 208 points, Zeeland West has 199, and Cass Tech has 193. We talk about this all the time. This could change this year. Cass Tech is one of the favorites to win the Division I title this year. Mm-hmm. My first thought was that's way too low for Cass Tech, and then you kind of do more deep diving, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, what was your first thought when you saw Cass Tech ranked at number 8?
I thought it was right there, and like you said earlier with the other teams and their success the years before. Mm-hmm. Cass Tech has been only on the rise since 2010. It's only been in the last 6 years. Mm-hmm. Maybe when they do this list again in a few years, you might have Cass Tech up there at number 1 or number 2.
Right. That's a very good point, because you saw promising things in 2010. 2011, I believe they won it, and they've been building ever since. And I think that's a really good point by you, and you have to remember that this is a decade-long list. It's not just, how great has Cass Tech been since 2010. You're missing some years before that. So that's a really good point.
And it's like the same here with King. King 13 is a good number because, their state title was in 07 and then in the last 2 years. But years in between
Right.
You know, they made the playoffs, but they didn't go too far.
To a similar extent with Muskegon, you look at with King. You know, King ran into those Brother Rice teams. You know, that won state titles, and there's always that roadblock. And King had strong seasons, but they never quite got there. So 2007 really helped them. And I think if they don't win in 2007, they're probably not on this list. But we're going a decade long, back-to-back titles. You know. Again, you first look at King and you think to yourself, they won back-to-back titles. Why aren't they higher? Well, then you look at, like what you said, there is that gap between 2007 and 2015 that leaves a lot to be desired in terms of a list like this.
A small school made this list, Ithaca, a Division VI power, deservingly to be on this list for what they have done in the last 6 years.
Without a doubt. You know, you look at what Ithaca has done. You know, they were just a handful of wins away from breaking the state record for consecutive wins. You know, Monroe St. Mary Catholic Central kind of threw a wrench into that, upset them in the state final. Ithaca went up to Division V last year. I think they're back down to Division VI this year, if I'm not mistaken. But again, Ithaca had that run that was just, you know, Coach Hesbrook and the Yellow Jackets, they had that run that we were all kind of mesmerized by, and doing what they were able to do, playing in Division VI. They were grabbing national headlines just for how dominant they were, and they are very deserving of being on this list. And, you know, they've had some really good players that have gone on to the next level that we kind of overlook because it is a Division VI team.
And Travis Smith won our Mr. Football Award a few years ago.
He won our Mr. Football Award, and he was a highly recruited quarterback, and there was a lot of expectations for that team. I know he got banged up in a state final, I believe.
Yeah, in 2012, he was knocked out in the first quarter.
That's right.
Logan Hesbrook came in and won the game for them.
Yeah, and I think that shows you with how well regarded Travis Smith was to be knocked out. And you're talking about a Division VI school. Not many Division VI schools have that, you know, go-to quarterback on a year in, year out basis. He has to be sidelined. Logan Hesbrook, who played wide receiver, comes in and leads the way. That just shows you how dominant and how well run that program was during those years. And they're still well run. Don't get me wrong. You know, they obviously it was a little bit of a hiccup, but they had to go up to Division V, which I think was maybe a little bit beyond their means for that year's team. And now they're back in Division VI, and I think, you know, Coach Hesbrook does a fantastic job with that program.
And then you have Clarkston and Dakota at 15 and 16.
Yep.
We've always heard about Clarkston, but it's been the last few years for them that's gotten them on the map.
Yeah, and you look at with Clarkston, and when they won it was just kind of like almost a finally feeling for the city of Clarkston, because they had come so close in so many different sports, you know, and had just come up just short of that state title. Kurt Richardson has done a great job with that program. They've taken that team pretty far in the playoffs, even though not quite making it, you know, to the mountaintop. I think we all expected it one year, but maybe not the other. But to win back-to-back titles really, in my opinion, cemented that team's legacy, that program's legacy, into being one of these dominant programs.
And Macomb, Dakota, they won the state title in 2006 and 2007. The Cougars have been good the last 10 years.
Yes, they've been very good.
And they have not gotten as far as we thought. You know, there's been a couple of those teams that, we might see them at Ford Field, but they come up short. But they're still a respectable program.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you look at just how good they were in 2006 and 2007. They beat Rockford and they beat Livonia Stevenson, two very good programs in those years. 38-16 over Rockford in 06, 41-21 over Stevenson in 07. That's very impressive. And then you look at, like what you were saying, they've gotten close the last couple of years. I believe in 2015 was a very good chance for that Dakota team to make it to the finals, you know, but right out of their own county was Romeo.
What teams could have been on this list?
You know, we were talking about this earlier. A team that I look at was Grand Rapids South Christian. They had a stretch of 3 straight appearances in the finals. They were in the finals from 2012 to 2014. They won it in 2012 and 2014. They had a quarterback by the name of John Wasink, who I believe went to Western Michigan. Very good player. Those were some really good teams. Those were teams that could score some points. If I had to guess, I would assume that they might be in the top 20 according to MaxPreps rankings. We can just speculate right now.
Or we could say like the last 4 out or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Maybe not surprised, but I would have thought that maybe South Christian would have been, you know, one of the fringe teams that could have made this list.
Teams that we also talked about too were Ishpeming.
Yep.
In Division 7.
Yep.
Marine City And Puamba, Westphalia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are all teams that have kind of made these little spurts of making it to Ford Field. The thing with Puamba, Westphalia that kind of helps them is they made it in 2011, didn't win it, went back in 2015, lost to Ishpeming, and then in 2016 they beat Detroit Loyola. And Detroit Loyola is a team that's been at Ford Field quite a bit too. Ishpeming, Jeff Olson's done a great job with that program, and they're always there. And last year I think they missed the playoffs last year, which was a little surprising. But you got to expect them to come back and just return to Ford Field, if not this year, but the next year, or the year after.
Out of the top 16, Jeff, which team you thought it was a little too high?
If I had to pick one, it would probably be Rockford. Just because you look at Rockford, they won a state title, they made another appearance. Not to take anything away from Rockford, because in the last couple of years they've had some highly ranked teams. According to MaxPreps in 2008, they were ranked as high as 2 in according to their rankings. But when I look at Rockford and I compare it to some of the teams that are just under them, I understand it because West Catholic is a smaller school, Muskegon Catholic Central is a smaller school, Ithaca is a smaller school, but those are all teams with at least 5 titles. So if we're talking true dominance, and maybe this is more just speaking to the Michigan high school football landscape, I don't know if there have been many more dominant teams than the 3 I just listed off. And again, not to take anything away from Rockford, because they've had some really good teams over the years. And to be honest, I think going into this year, I think Rockford has to be one of the favorites to win it all. But you look at West Catholic, they've won, I believe, each of the last 5 titles. You look at Muskegon Catholic Central, which is just...
They can probably win it in 6 or Division 6,
They
Division
really-
7, Division 5.
They really could, and that's kind of the unfortunate thing, because a lot of people assume that they're Division 8, it's just because they're a small school beating up on other small schools. If they could move up, I really think they would compete in Division 7. I really think they would compete with a team like Ithaca in Division 6. I think once you get up past Division 6 and you look at Division 5, maybe that's a little bit beyond their means, but they've still dominated, and that's what this list is really about.
And if they were in 5, you probably would have saw them against West Catholic in the regionals or the semis.
That's a very good point. They wouldn't meet in the finals, that's for sure. You look at Muskegon Catholic Central, Steve Sirwan has not shied away from trying to schedule tougher competition for his team. That's a team that's proven itself year after year, and they've played some of the Division 5 and 6 teams over the years.
And they play Country Day.
Yeah, they played a Country Day, which Country Day is a Division 4 school. So this is still a team that you can't take lightly. And again, we're talking about dominant teams, and West Catholic, Muskegon Catholic Central, Ithaca, those are very dominant teams that maybe should be a little bit higher. Just my take on it. I think gets a little bit overlooked in this list is Lowell. No, Lowell, year in, year out, is a team that is very dominant. I'm not saying that they're misranked. But this is a team, they've won a title, and year after year after year after year, Noel Dean has this team ready to go, and they are somehow under the radar to a certain extent. We all expect Lowell to make noise. Like, I'm expecting Lowell to win the state title this year. But again, this is a team that you look at number 3 and you kind of think about it and go, oh yeah, they've made it to Ford Field 4 times in the past decade. They've won a state title. You look at their ranking year after year after year. In the span that MaxPreps laid out for us, they haven't gone unranked. So I mean, you have to take that into account for. So
yeah, you could easily, like, when I first looked at this, I'm like, you can put CC over Lowell, but
you could.
But the rankings are there. CC, the only time they had been unranked was in 06 and 2014.
Right. I think it just speaks to the consistency of those programs. You look at Detroit Catholic Central, and they've made the finals, and they've had some tough losses. Whether it's to Clarkston or to Cass Tech, but this is still as consistent of a program as it really gets. It's that smash mouth football that they run. They still run that wham, but it's what's worked for them over the years. Looking at Lowell and Catholic Central, those are 2 teams that only won title in the last 10 years, dating back to 2006. That doesn't properly explain just how good these programs are. We see a lot of teams that have a lot of titles. I guess that you kind of swing that back and you look at Rockford, who has only won one title in that stretch. I think the difference between those teams is the state finals appearances. Lowell's been to the finals 3 times. They almost pulled off the upset in 15 over King. So now I want to ask you this. Is there a team on this list that you think is a little bit overlooked or should be higher maybe in your opinion?
We just talked moments ago, like we could have easily had CC over Lowell. Mm-hmm. I will say East Grand Rapids is overlooked, even at 5. Just what they have done over the last 10 years. I know in the last few they have not made it as far. I know they made the semifinals a couple years ago, and they lost Orchard Lake St. Mary's in the 20-foot snowstorm
right
out in Howell. But I think East Grand Rapids had a good case to be second, third, or even over Orchard Lake St. Mary's. But looking at it right now, I say East Grand Rapids. Mm-hmm. You can make a case for Ithaca.
Yep.
And Grand Rapids West Catholic. When I first saw this list last week, I was like, they got this wrong, but really deep diving into this,
right?
MaxPreps did a good job of breaking this all down and getting the top 16 teams over the last 10 years.
Yeah. When you look at their parameters, I think that's the one thing when you look at it, you kind of go, well, that's not right. But you look at their parameters, the ones that they set for this list, it makes a lot of sense. They put a lot of weight into their football computer rankings. That's pretty well weighted. You look at, like you were talking about, East Grand Rapids. In 2007, they were the number 1 ranked team. That's a hefty 25 points for East Grand Rapids to kind of, help their rankings, because you look, at 208 points right behind them is Brother Rice. So that's important. So we look at this as kind of there's no way that this team is the most dominant. But when you look at the parameters and the guidelines that MaxPreps had set out for this, it makes a lot of sense. And don't get me wrong, nobody's going to properly pick the top any teams of the past decade, 5 years, whatever you want it to be, because everybody has a differencing of an opinion. That's why we're doing this podcast, because it's a fun discussion point.
Yeah. And Brother Rice, the last couple of years hasn't been the greatest for Rice.
Right.
They could have been higher up on this list.
Oh, they absolutely could have. With that being said, that was, those were such good Brother Rice teams. I mean, you look at it, that Brother Rice team that fell De La Salle in 2014, if they win a state title there, you look at that little aspect. If De La Salle hadn't upset Brother Rice, these rankings would look a lot different probably, because De La Salle would not have won that title and would have probably dropped off this list, and Brother Rice could be higher. But with going back to what you said, you have Brother Rice who simply in 2015, 2016 had a little bit of a step back. You could tell improvement, especially last year. They improved, in my opinion, a great deal.
Last year, they were not predicted to go to the playoffs. They could have been a 5-4.
Right.
They got in at 6-3 at the end. They gave CC a game, double overtime last year.
Yeah, and you can see Brother Rice building back towards it, but I think that's the fun of these lists, because all of these teams have had steps back. East Grand Rapids obviously had a big step back after their stretch of state championships, but it kind of, for Brother Rice to still be ranked number 6 shows just how dominant those programs were, leading up to that 2014 year, which was the year that they lost De La Salle. Shows you a lot of the consistency. We talk about dominance, and we've said that a lot, but more so than anything, I think it's the consistency. Because if you're not a consistent program, you're not going to be on this list, even if you won a state title or 2.
Lastly, if they do this list again after the 2020 season, and they do it from the last 10 years, from 2010 to 2020, who do you think will be number 1?
Cass Tech. Not to answer that too quickly, but this is a program that was on the rise, like we had said earlier, starting in 2010 and built to back-to-back titles and then won another title. We're in the midst of seeing a dynasty in Division I, and it's so difficult because Cass Tech, they run into a lot of good teams. They lost to Romeo a couple of years ago in the final. They meet Catholic Central a lot in the final. That's always
and they also meet like Saline, like in the regionals,
right,
or in the semifinal.
Right. So it's hard to say it definitively, but even look to Cass Tech this year. This is a very talented team that could definitely win a state title. They could, at the end of the season, come a couple days after Thanksgiving, this could be the team that's winning a second straight state title. So I lean towards Cass Tech because you look at the number of high level players that they produce, and the amount of postseason success that they've had. Could they take that next step to go to 2020 and win a couple more titles? You're talking about 5 in the past decade. Yeah. That says a lot. Is there a team that you particularly point out as that team that could be number one?
Well, Cass Tech will be up there as number one. I can see like Orchard Lake St. Mary's, Detroit Catholic Central, Muskegon and Lowell being up there. Added teams to the list. You can say Saline. Saline will be up there.
They could be a new team in this list, because that's a team that's been knocking on the doorstep for a couple of years. Really, they've been really close. They made it to a final. That could be a team that could be that team like Clarkston that won back-to-back titles, but just couldn't quite get there and get over the mountaintop. And when they do, they make quite a statement.
And another team could be like Walled Lake Western.
It's an interesting one. But all you're looking for these teams is that one moment to get you over the top. That's what these programs are looking for. Now, some of them have already reached the mountaintop. And when I say that, your Catholic Centrals or St. Mary's, teams that have won so many times, those are teams that, in my eyes, are over the mountaintops. That next tier of teams, I think, is what we're waiting for. And with that's how teams like Clarkston and Dakota and De La Salle, and I don't want to say King because they've won 3 titles, but those are teams that finally reached that mountaintop and kind of came back down to earth a little bit. And you kind of wait for that next wave of teams to maybe shake things up.
Well, thanks a lot, Jeff.
My pleasure.
And have fun on your vacation this upcoming week.
Thank you. I'll be looking for another list that we can debate while I'm on vacation.
Yes. And that's it for Kids Corner, presented by Hungry Howie's Dough Raiser. Your next fundraiser comes with Flavor Crust. Go to doughraiser.com for more details. I'm Jonathon Kidd along with Jeff Dullack. Have a good afternoon.
Fundraising should be fresh, flavorful, and simple. We have the perfect solution at Hungry Howie's, Dough Raiser. Your team or school can sell paper pizza certificates that can be redeemed for 1 medium pizza at participating locations.
Hungry Howie's makes it easy. It's just a little mini pizza box, but we make lots of money, lots of dough.
Go to doughraiser.com to learn more and sign up. Your next fundraiser comes with flavored crust. Welcome to Hungry Howie's Dough Raiser.